Welcome, everyone. I'll wait a few moments here to allow our attendees to join. In the meantime, feel free to grab a coffee or a tea, and we'll be underway shortly. Some of you are still trickling in, so I'll just wait one more minute here before getting started. All right, folks, let's get cracking. Thank you all for making time in your busy calendar to join our webinar today. And good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm coming to you live from beautiful Prince Edward Island on the east coast of Canada, where it is currently chilly, but a lovely, bright, sunny day. I recognize a lot of our attendees' names today. Seems we have some folks from coast to coast, Canada and the US, and agencies large and small. And you're all here for Function Point's first product series webinar of 2025. Over the next half hour or so, I'll highlight our major releases from Q1, as well as our first release of Q2. This will include some demos, so we can see what some of our new functionality looks like in action. Before we close, I'll also touch on what you can expect from Function Point in Q2 and beyond. And as always, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Now, I've met many of you before, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alec, and I am Function Point's product specialist, as well as the easternmost member of our team. You'll have to excuse my voice, by the way. I'm currently fighting off a cold. In fact, I've got a 19-month-old daughter in daycare, so I'm always fighting off a cold, it seems. But I am hosting solo today, which means I may not be able to address your questions in real time. That said, please still feel free to submit your questions through the webinar tool. I will pour through the list during our designated Q&A period. And of course, anything we don't get to, I will answer via email afterwards. Without further ado, though, let's talk releases. So here we have a list of select new features that we rolled out in Q1. So these are items that we'll see demonstrated during this webinar today. And I'll run through this list briefly. So in January, we introduced restricted access permissions. The intention behind this one is to allow agencies to limit freelancer access to only the jobs required for their work and preventing access to everything else. In February, we added new card settings for tasks in the Kanban board. So previously, as you'll recall, task cards effectively only showed the job name and due date, but this release made new details available and allows you, the user, to pick which details you want to see for each task. In March, we rolled out multi-office support for the work planning view. If your agency manages staff across multiple offices in Function Point, this release finally makes it possible to manage those resources across offices. And in April, this week, in fact, we released an update to admin fees. So if you're unfamiliar, admin fees offer a way to include automatically calculated percentage-based fees and discounts on an estimate. So before now, their utility was a little limited, but as of this week, they're a heck of a lot more flexible. So please stick around. We'll be seeing each of these items in action during this webinar. Now, I'm curious to know how many of you have already tried out any of the new features I've just mentioned. So I will throw a quick poll up on the screen here. So the question is simply, which of our recent releases have you already tried? You can select more than one option and we'll give everyone a minute or so to respond. Interestingly, I'm already seeing some love for customizable admin fees, and this was only live 2 days ago. So great stuff. We'll wait a few more seconds here for responses. All right, we'll end it there. I'll show the results on the screen. Interesting, though not unexpected, this does align with my user data, but good to know that some of you are seeing these features for the first time today. So let's talk restricted access permissions. Many of you, of course, work with freelancers or perhaps interns, and you may or may not provide them access to your function point. When managing these users, we heard your feedback that you may want to be able to limit their access to only estimates, jobs, and projects that they're working on. And this is now, in fact, possible with a new permission you'll find in your admin settings called restricted access. The result for users whose access is restricted is that restricted items aren't searchable, so they are omitted from related search results. And if the user attempts to navigate to a restricted item directly via a link, they will encounter a warning page barring access. So to be clear, this is something done per user, so your unrestricted staff will see no change, but you're effectively walling off your restricted users. So let's just see this in action within a function point demo environment. First, we'll review the setup side. You can imagine here that I'm an administrator, and perhaps I'm onboarding a new freelancer that we've just brought on. As such, I'll navigate to our staff list. Beth here is my new freelancer, and I'll be adjusting her permissions. So currently, it looks like Beth has full access to all jobs in my function point system. However, with our new restricted access permission set, I can change that. When enabled, as it is here, this permission allows this user to view all jobs, projects, estimates for which they are the creator, the account executive, sorry, just all jobs, estimates, and projects, full stop. When disabled, the user will be restricted to just the jobs, estimates, and projects for which they are the creator, the account executive, or job contact. So let me restate that in plain English there. If your freelancer creates a job, they'll have access. If you add them to a job, they'll have access. Otherwise, no access. So for Beth here, I'll disable this permission, and then I'll select Submit. As it stands now, Beth will not be able to access anything for which she is not a job contact. So the next step is to add Beth to any jobs that she's working on. Here we have a design job for my client North Shore Auto Group. Beth will be working on this job, and so I'll add her as a job contact. To do this, I'll switch to the Contacts tab and select Manage Job Contacts. On the left-hand side, we'll see a list of all of my staff, and I can simply select the checkbox next to Beth's name to add her, and then I'll select Submit. So that's it from an admin perspective. I would simply rinse and repeat for all jobs that Beth is working on. But of course, let's see this from Beth's perspective. Let's see what she would see on her end. So I'm going to go ahead and log out, and we'll log into Beth's account. So we're in here as Beth now, and Beth doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. In fact, on her dashboard, she has a tile listing all of her open jobs. And we can see that that, in fact, includes the job that we just added her to. But let's see what happens when Beth tries to search for jobs, though. So I'll go to Jobs, Find Job. Beth will see a message box right here indicating that her search result will be restricted to her own jobs or jobs for which she is a contact. The intention behind this is to ensure Beth isn't drawing conclusions or making decisions based on what she thinks is all the data in function point. So we're letting her know here that not all jobs will be included in the results. If in fact I select find active, I should see we're just limited to jobs for which Beth is the AE or the creator has been manually added. So I can assure you that I have well over 70 jobs in function point, and so Beth is just seeing a limited view here. Now, what about if Beth has a direct link to a restricted job? So this might be something that may have been shared by a colleague via email or in a group chat. I've got a link to one right here. Let's see what happens when I try to navigate to it. As you can see, Beth sees an error message indicating that the content is restricted and that someone with the necessary permissions will need to add her to the job first. So that's it. Just a quick look here at our new restricted access permissions. Next, let's look at Kanban board card customization. If you've used our Kanban board before, you'll be familiar with the fact that each task card included in the each task card includes the task name, job name, and due date. With this release, we've made it possible to toggle on and off the details that you want to see included. In the same stroke, we've made new details available to be included. So that's client name, milestone, and start date. The result here is that you can now choose how much or how little detail you want to see for each task. So I know some agencies use milestone heavily and will want to see that here. Other agencies want start date and due date only with no other clutter. And hey, if you want to see everything, then power to you, go for it. All of these scenarios are now possible. And let's see this one in action as well. So let's navigate to our Kanban board. And here we have our Kanban board. So from this view, I can manage tasks for myself or perhaps for my team. And tasks are represented by cards, like this one here, which I can interact with. Cards are organized into these columns or swim lanes based on status. So in this case, I can see draft, assigned, in progress, and completed tasks. This update relates to the task details we see in each card. So currently, if I look at this one task, for example, I can see the task name, of course, but also the job name and the due date, and that's about it. But now we have the ability to toggle certain details on or off. This can be done under the settings icon, and then within card settings, you'll see a list of available task details with check marks next to ones currently included. So for me right now, that's job name and due date. And in fact, that is the default state. But let's say that I want to see start date and due date only. I can toggle job name off, toggle start date on, and you'll see that the cards have been updated accordingly. So I now have this, in fact, slightly more compact view showing me for each task, both the start date and the due date. Perhaps you're an agency, like I mentioned, that heavily uses task milestones. Well, instead, I could select, let's say, company name, milestone, and due date to see that info at a glance on the Kanban board. So for this task here, I have, of course, the task name at the top, and then I have the client name, and then a milestone that I've configured for this task, and then, of course, the due date. So that's it. This is a pretty flexible and pretty useful addition for agencies using the Kanban board for task management. And if you aren't currently using this view, then this might be something that has hopefully piqued your interest. Next, let's talk work planning view. So this view saw a couple of updates recently. First, a performance boost in the fall. You will have noticed this if you're managing, say, 50 plus staff with heavy task usage. Many larger agencies have had work planning view load time cut in half due to some new parallelization behind the scenes. For agencies with multiple offices in Function Point, then definitely the more exciting release came in March with multi-office support in the work planning view. So for context, previously the work planning view limited traffic managers to seeing staff and job data for their own office only. Now you can manage resources across your offices in one place. So as part of this, you'll see a new office label below staff names. This indicates the office to which a user belongs, which may sound unnecessary, but if you're assigning work for 2 or 3 offices in Function Point and you have multiple creative staff named Mark, then this is for you, and that is a true story. You'll also see 2 new office filters in the work planning view filter list. So for agencies wanting to separately manage resources for each office, or perhaps zoom in on one office at a time, then these filters allow you to filter your staff and tasks accordingly. So let's see this one in action as well. So here we have the work planning view. Perhaps if you're unfamiliar with this view, this is a short-term forecasting tool that provides visibility into the availability and workload of your team. So we have a list of roles and staff on the vertical axis, and then calendar days on the horizontal axis. Within each of these staff rows, you'll see colored bars. These represent assigned tasks. So in the case of Jess here, I have a colored bar spanning from the 14th to the 18th, and this is a task. This is a pre-production task that's been assigned to Jess. One thing you may notice off the bat is the new office label. This is below each staff member's name. So we can see at a glance that Jess works in the Function Point Vancouver office, and Victoria works in the Toronto office. And yes, we are seeing staff across multiple offices here in the work planning view. So these staff appear in line and will still be grouped by role as you would expect. So in the case of our project managers, I can see the combined workload and capacity of all of my project managers across all my offices in this one place. Now, not all agencies with multiple offices manage the resources in this way. In fact, you may prefer the previous approach, which limited visibility to your own office only. Fortunately, we've added 2 new filters that give you this flexibility. So let's look at the filter list on the left-hand side. You'll see 2 new filters here at the bottom of the list. The first filter is for staff office. So this one allows me to filter this view to only staff from a particular office or offices. So let's say that I want to look at my Vancouver office only. I can select it from the list, and we'll see the work planning be updated accordingly. So I'm now seeing only staff from that one Vancouver office. My demo only includes 2 offices, but you could filter to a few offices at once. Let's say focusing on a couple of West Coast offices, for example. The second filter is for work office. For many of you, this might have the same effect, but the important distinction here is that we're able to filter the office to which the work itself pertains. So let me select Vancouver again. And here what we're seeing is only Vancouver jobs, regardless of the staff that are working on them. In fact, it looks like I have some Toronto staff who are actually working on Vancouver jobs or jobs for the Vancouver office. So that's about it for this feature. I'm sure there'll be a couple of questions, so I'm sure we'll revisit this towards the end of the webinar. But this was a major roadmap item completed, as well as a long-awaited release for those of you with multiple offices. So let's hop back to the slide deck for a second. Lastly, I'll highlight our latest release, which is mentioned at the top of our webinar, makes our existing admin fee feature a heck of a lot more flexible. So as a reminder, admin fees are a type of external expense in Function Point, and when included on an estimate, they will automatically calculate percentage-based fees or discounts. So with this update, you now have control over how each admin fee is applied. So you can configure the scope, so which service type it applies to, and whether it calculates based on a single service group or to the whole estimate. It might be unclear from this description, but it does unlock some long requested use cases, which I will demonstrate right now. So let's look at the configuration piece first, and then we'll see admin fees in action. So here I have a couple of existing external expenses that have been set up as admin fees. We'll look at this first one in particular, the media management fee. And I've selected edit so we can look at these settings on this expense here. You can see that the admin fee box has been checked. Previously, this was the only setting, either on or off. But to the right, we've added two new settings that allow you to configure the scope for yourself. So the first setting, this drop down here, is the applicable service type. So you can decide whether an admin fee should consider services, expenses, or in fact, all service types. Sorry, that's this one here. The second one is level. This is the first box. So here you can decide if the admin fee should be limited to the service group to which it belongs, or whether it should consider the whole estimate. And the impact of those settings are expressed in natural language, so it is somewhat clear in this case. When included on an estimate, apply this admin fee at the estimate level, let's say, based on all services and expenses. So my intention with this particular one that I've set up here, this media management fee, is that when I add this to a service group with media expenses, it'll automatically add a percentage-based fee on those media expenses only. So we'll see that one in action in a second. But let's look at the configuration piece for the other admin fee I mentioned, which is a discount. So again, admin fee has been checked here, but the two settings, these two dropdowns do differ from the previous example. So in this case, the admin fee is applied at the estimate level and based on all services and expenses. My intention with this one is that when I add this to my estimate, it'll automatically take off a percentage of the total value of the estimate. So I can appreciate that there's some nuance here. So let's leave the settings behind and instead now see how these two example admin fees actually work on an estimate. So I'll create a small media estimate first. This estimate will include some hourly agency services and then a media buy. So I've selected both of those service groups. And if I expand the media group, you'll notice that I've added that media admin fee to the media group so that it's always brought in automatically when I create a media estimate. So here we have my estimate. It's my list of service groups that I selected at the previous stage. And here I can estimate my pricing as usual. So I'll put in a few hours of agency services, and then I'll divvy up my media budget across these three categories. Let's say $1,000 on print, 500 on broadcast, and 500 on online. Notice that as I enter my media budget here, my media admin fee, this bottom line, was recalculating automatically. So I'm not having to manually figure out this percentage for this management fee. It's been updated for me with every single change. So I've got my media budget with expenses, or sorry, with markup here, and this admin fee has been calculated to be $235 on top of my media budget. I can click save. So very useful stuff here to have it done automatically. We're hopeful that this is going to limit manual error, having to recalculate these, or perhaps if there was a scope change or a revision of this estimate, again, this admin fee will be recalculated automatically for me every single edit. Let's create a second example estimate now. This estimate will also include some hourly services, some expenses, and then a small discount. If I expand this group, you'll notice that I've added the discounted min fee to this discount group, again, so that I can bring it in automatically as needed. Next, I can estimate my pricing as usual. So again, I'll include some hourly services, so a few hours for design. And then I have some expenses. Let's say there's $200 of miscellaneous supplies, 500 for travel, and maybe $100 for printing. As with before, notice that my 5% discount item here is being recalculated automatically as I update my estimated pricing. So again, I'm not having to manually figure out this percentage discount. It's all done for me. So currently this 5% discount is coming out to a $68 discount. Let's say that I increased my travel budget from 500 to 1,000, and you'll see this admin fee discount, again, recalculated for me automatically. So really useful stuff. And that's really all there is to it with this. While it is a minor change, it does make some things possible that I've heard many requests on, like that automatic percentage-based discount or the automatic fees on expenses. So definitely a great first release for Q2. So we've had a healthy look back here at our recent releases, but I would be remiss if I didn't tease what you can expect from Function Point in the near future. So here we have some items here on the slide. So top of that list is a brand new feature we're calling the task drawer. This is a slide out component that appears when selecting a task anywhere in Function Point. So rather than being directed to the task details page, you'll see this slide out component on the same page without losing the context of your work. So you can expect a beta release of that this spring. Next is a user interface refresh. This is exactly as it sounds, with an emphasis on consistency and clarity. This is expected in the summer. We've also got some new integrations in the work. In fact, multiple integrations releasing later this year. I won't go into specifics, but there will be more to share at a future date. And of course, these are just the big ticket items. So you can expect, as always, some minor but useful enhancements released year round at a regular cadence. And with that, we've reached the end of our core content for the day. It's been about 30 minutes. We have some time left, but I want to thank all of you for joining me to look at what's coming Q1 and what's coming next. If I didn't mention it already, this webinar has been recorded and you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel shortly. If you do want to stick around for just a few more minutes, we have some time allotted for Q&A. No doubt some questions have come in. So let's have a look here for some interesting ones. We don't want to bubble up here. So we had a question on the Kanban board, which was just how do we get to the Kanban board? This is a common question for agencies that haven't really explored it before. So let's take a quick look at that. So here I am in Function Point. The Kanban board can be found under the Tasks menu, under this Tasks and To-Dos label. Not only I am seeing the board, but by default, you may see this page as a list view. That's because this view or this page can be seen in both a list and a board view. So if you do see it as a list view, we'll select this display menu and select board. And that allows us to switch to the board view instead of the list view. If you do want this to be your default view, you can in fact go to that same settings icon I showed earlier, and under view settings, select task status as the default view rather than list view. That's a good question. All right, so we have another question related to the restricted access permissions. So you'll recall in the example, we had restricted Beth's access to certain jobs. And the question is, would Beth in that example see any financials? And it's a good question. In fact, what we had done is we had limited Beth's view to see only certain jobs, but we didn't affect her permissions globally. So if Beth has permission to see job financials, Beth would still be able to see financials for the jobs she has access to. But there are separate permissions for limiting access to certain financials. So if we did also want to limit Beth's ability to see financials, and there's separate permission settings for that. So I would encourage you to check out our permission sets page and have a look through at some of the more detailed or nuanced permissions in this list, because there are in fact some permissions relating to job financials. Question. So we have a question regarding the admin fee. So the question is, can the admin fee be added as an internal service rather than as an external expense? Well, it's a good question. I will say that the admin fee functionality piggybacks off of existing external expense functionality. So we can't turn an internal service into an admin fee. It's only an external expense. So if you go to add an external expense, you'll see this checkbox. That's not to say that we have to recognize actuals against these admin fees. So you'll likely map this item to a income item in QuickBooks, let's say, but it may not be mapped to a COGS because there will not necessarily be a COGS component. But to just reiterate what I said, an admin fee will only ever be an external expense. Okay, I think we have time for one more question here. Again, about the Kanban view, and it's whether or not the Kanban view can be added to the dashboard. So it can. The question is also whether or not we can show the timesheet panel at the same time. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I will go ahead and create a new custom dashboard. If you haven't done this before, this custom dashboard screen, which again I accessed from this dashboard menu, customize dashboard, it allows me to set my own dashboard layouts. I'll call this one Kanban board, and you'll see the various layouts that we can select. The question was whether or not it could be included in a two-panel layout with our timesheets on the left. Fortunately, no, it can't. The Kanban board can only be seen on the dashboard in this full page layout. So if I select it here, as I've just done, I can select tasks and to-dos as the file content. I'll click Save and Close, and I'll switch to that view. As I referred to before, this page, this tasks and to-dos can be seen as both a list and a board, but luckily I can switch from list to board right here. And if that is my default view, then every single time I return to the dashboard, I'll be able to see my tasks on the Kanban board. It's a great question. All right, we're a couple minutes over time, folks. Thank you for your questions. We'll leave it there for today, I think. It's been a pleasure being your host despite my cold, so thanks for bearing with me. You can, of course, expect to see me again at our next product update at the beginning of Q3. Until then, this is me signing off, and I wish you all a great rest of your day.